As a longtime fan of the Need for Speed franchise, I wanted to take a moment to kind of go on a little bit of a rant here, or video diary or something, to describe my feelings towards Need for Speed Heat. Need for Speed Heat being the most recent addition to the franchise, coming out in 2019, and in my opinion, it's one of the best games to come out in the past decade from Ghost Games, and rather the Need for Speed franchise as a whole. So how did this happen? Coming from Ghost Games picking up the mantle from Criterion Games, saying, okay, you have to push the Need for Speed franchise forward. You have to take this forward. And after, honestly, a couple of busts of games, why on this fourth or fifth game, why did it work? And in my opinion, with how and why this all worked, I think it's mainly because Ghost Games before kind of, but not really listened to the fans of the franchise, and yet with this game, they finally said, okay, let's make a Need for Speed game, a definitive game that takes some of the best features and everything from all sorts of different games, and let's make it into one. And with this, I'll just kind of be describing a couple of different views or different perspectives on how they took everything, and some of the things that I've been noticing as recurring themes throughout Need for Speed Heat, how we could tell that they definitely did their research versus other games where they took like an experimental route and tried making their own thing, and ultimately maybe not hitting the mark that they were looking for. So with every Need for Speed game, obviously it's a racing game, so we have to take a look at the cars. And the reason why I know that they really cared about their cars, apart from the fact that even in the past couple of games, they really did a fan service here. Past couple of games, you'll note from DLC and whatnot that you'll have the stereotypical, you'll get the Need for Speed M3 GTR from Most Wanted, which is the definitive poster child of the whole franchise as of right now. However, they did a little bit more research, and I really appreciated that. You know, from scrolling through all the cars in, the dealership here, of course you're going to see the yellow Lamborghini Diablo SV, which a lot of you know is the cover poster child from Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 3, or rather Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit? Yeah, I think it was the latter. Fantastic game, played the crap out of that. And you'll get to see that game. You'll see that car every now and again from the Most Wanted remake and from, I believe, in Rivals as a DLC car as well. I'm not sure about that one. So I appreciated that they included that. And yes, they could have done the Diablo VT 6.0, whatever that one was from like 2001, as the better version of the Diablo. But yet they chose the more iconic one, which I appreciated that they really brought that back. But also looking through the cars, there are a lot of other things that really grabbed me and say that was kind of unexpected here. So towards the end of the list, you'll actually see a couple of reward cards where you actually have what looks like to be a 370Z from the run. It says the Need for Speed Heat license plate on it, so I'm not quite sure that it is, but that's at least kind of my guesstimate for that one there. And here's the big one that really threw me off here, was the Skyline from Underground. We haven't seen that car in such a long time. And on top of that too, they have the 350Z from Underground 2. Both two cars from the Underground series that just really haven't made an appearance in who knows how long. And suddenly they're there, which is kind of a big definitive, like, hey, here's a little bit of thank you for people who have played, an Underground series, which honestly they took a lot of inspiration from with Need for Speed Heat. With back in the Underground days, they really used a lot of West Coast kind of palm tree summer night vibe going on. So it was almost intuitive that they took that similar feeling for when they created a Miami-based city. Yes, it's on the other side of the coast, or on the other side of the United States. However, it still has that same feel. I did appreciate the fact that they noticed in recent internet history that a lot of people, for whatever reason, really like that synthwave aesthetic. So they just went full-blown with it, and they made sure to get the Ferrari Testarossa in there, which they probably wouldn't have done without. And they have all these neon lights and everything, and it's just perfect for that. But anyway, back to the cars here. But the other thing, too, that I really thought was fun is that even if they weren't intuitively thinking about adding certain cars in, they did include some certain cars that, you know, the community could pick up on and create designs based off of it. So, of course, they had to do the RX-7, which, if you can imagine a Need for Speed Underground 3 sequel-esque kind of game without an RX-7, you've got to be absolutely out of your mind. And the reason why I really point out this one is that the community, the nice thing about Need for Speed Heat is that the community can create wraps and designs, and then they can post them. And then, you know, people like myself who are not completely artistically inclined in creating wraps and really going through all of it, like I'll make a little bit of adjustments here and there to, you know, make it kind of my own. But the thing that I liked was that immediately the Need for Speed community is like, oh, we have an RX-7, we have to go with, you know, creating a wrap for Kenji's RX-7 from Carbon. And I saw that, I'm like, yep, I need this car, I need this wrap, it's now going to be my drift car. So you can sure as hell bet that when I get an RX-8 or even the DB11, then I'm going to find Wolf's DBS kind of wrap looking thing, and then Darius's R8. So I'm definitely going to find those. And that's the thing that I love about this, is that even if the developers weren't, I would suppose that they weren't intending on completely putting the car in the game, but I appreciated their effort with opening it up to the community so they could create, you know, an everlasting, you know, remembrance of all the favorite cars from the Need for Speed franchise from the past games. So with this part of the video here, this kind of main segment, this is the majority, the bulk of why I feel like that Need for Speed Heat was a nice bookend to the Need for Speed franchise, as it just took all these favorite little pieces from all these games that we know and love. Starting out from the very beginning with police chases, they're obviously back. They came all the way back from Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit. So it's awesome that they brought those back. You know, there's some games, I think Ghost Games for all of its run with Need for Speed has included police chases in some fashion, so I'm glad that they kept with it. Even though that games like Pro Street and Shift were fun without it, and even Underground, they were fun without it, but there's just something missing, that it was still Need for Speed, but it wasn't like a true Need for Speed game per se. The one thing that really caught me off guard when I heard this game was announced was the fact that they were doing daytime sanctioned racing events, which was totally a callback to Pro Street, which is something that I feel like that game was awesome, incredibly underrated, and loved every minute of it. So I definitely, kind of going back to the cars as well, I'm definitely going to see if I can find, what was it, Rio's Evo 10? I'm pretty sure somebody's got a skin for that, or a wrap made for that, so that's something else I'm going to have to go back and find. We also have to remember with Need for Speed games that customization wasn't always there, so I'm, again, really glad that they brought that back, which was coming from, you know, the Underground series, when that was the first time where you could truly customize cars beyond the colors. You know, with customization with Ghost Games hasn't always been there, which I'm glad that they brought it. Again, I'm glad they brought it back with Payback and with Need for Speed, but it wasn't entirely there with Rivals, if I recall correctly. And again, it was just kind of a, you know, here's some standard exotic cars, change the color, have fun, who cares. So, customization was a huge thing back with the Underground series. I'm glad that they really brought it back, as well as the Underglow, which was there for the Underground series and then just left for, like, the better part of a decade, 15 years, and then came back with, I believe, Need for Speed, 2015, I believe. And one of the other things I really appreciated about this game is when you get into the night racing and you're doing your police chases and this, that, the other thing, I loved the look and feel that it just seemed exactly like racing in Need for Speed Carbon. You've got some of those canyon-esque events where it's maybe not a mountain, but it's really high up on a hill, and then you've got these curvy, chicanes and roads going up on there. It just felt like those beautiful canyon roads, and then even going through part of the cities and in the middle of Miami or whatever it's called, it felt like a lot of callbacks back to Fortuna. I loved it so much. The one thing that I'm a little bit curious about to see more about this, because I haven't gone that far into the game with dealing with this kind of stuff yet. With the Hot Pursuit remake, they decided to really go ham on their power-ups, and it seems like they've made a little bit of a return. Yes, Rivals had a lot of it, but I'm glad that they have just a little bit of it to keep it interesting, like those passive kind of power-ups where it's, oh hey, you have reinflatable tires. Sweet, that means that if you run over a spike strip that you're not dead immediately. It's kind of nice. And then kind of something else that maybe not too many people would have noticed as well, unless they played Most Wanted remake from 2012, is those kind of weird, surreal transitions in between races. I thought those were phenomenal, that Criterion Games really took it into another step, and it was very unexpected and very weird, and I really appreciated them, as weird as they were. And you'll get quite a few scaled back versions of it. When you're transitioning from day to night, you'll get that rotating screen or whatever. That's kind of fun. Which I appreciated them looking back towards, keeping things interesting in between races. And something else that I noticed too with Ghost Games is, as they've been looking back on Need for Speed games in order to find little clues on how to make their game better, they also looked at, other games that from other franchises that they could have been inspired by. The thing that I found really interesting, that was a little bit annoying at first, but actually was kind of interesting with the more and more that I play it, is the amount of destructibles. It seems like in Payback that most things were destructibles, but then you'll get that every random lamppost that just wasn't, so then it'll just completely destroy your race as you're expecting it to fall down, and then it doesn't. And I'm really glad that they made a lot of the items in kind of the areas destructible, just because, again, even back to the Hot Pursuit days where you've got a palm tree that you're trying to weave around, and then you just suddenly crash into it, and again, there goes your race, you're kind of done, that's it. The fact that you can kind of just drive through everything is really nice, which really harks back to the Burnout environment, where just everything is destructible, and I loved that so much. Unfortunately, they didn't take back the crash cams that Criterion Games loved for their short run with the Need for Speed series. I hated the crash cams. I think everybody else can kind of agree with that. And also something else that they learned wasn't necessarily from other franchises or, the Need for Speed franchise as a whole. They actually learned from their own games that they worked on. I actually really appreciate the damage modeling systems from Rivals, where you actually do have to worry a little bit about your own car damage, as well as, there's little health bars above the police cars now as well, which is something that never really happened with too many Need for Speed games prior to 2010 or whatever. The fact that the police aren't just kind of, you have to one-hit KO them to kill them out, that there is some damage modeling with them. And I do appreciate, like I was saying, I do appreciate the fact that you have to kind of watch your own butt with your own health, because sometimes, it would be great that every game was like Wreckfest, but we know as soon as somebody hits head-on traffic that your car is just totaled, and that's just not much of fun. So there's a fine line to be had between, watching your own health, making your car indestructible, and making your car super fragile. So I appreciate that they took it a little bit more on the stronger side of things to keep it interesting, but it's not, they took it to the point that old Need for Speed games where you're a tank and there is no damage. The other thing that I found very interesting was the exhaust customization feature. was thinking Need for Speed 2015 had it, but again, I haven't really played it much, so I don't think I could really safely say that. It seems like that it was just a really nice addition where you could actually edit the timbre of the exhaust, which is like, who would have thought of that? That was just awesome. And the biggest thing that makes this game miles better than any Need for Speed game in the past decade, bar none, is that Ghost Games did themselves a favor and got themselves some good writers. They learned how to tell a compelling story, which really lacked in some of the past Need for Speed games, especially in Need for Speed Run, and especially in Need for Speed Undercover. Pro Street was pretty decent. Carbon was great. Most Wanted, I hear, was amazing. Underground, and the Underground series was meh, but as much as people say Need for Speed games weren't based around stories, a lot of the franchise favorites were based around stories. So I'm glad that they did themselves due diligence and learned from Payback and Need for Speed 2015, where it's just, what is this story? Why are they even trying? This is just god-awful. And then they made, like, you know, a really good story with Need for Speed Heat, having this clash between your street gang and the fact that they're corrupt cops, which make the cops so much more real versus other games where they're just faceless police cars with people yelling at you type thing, like, get off my lawn. It's like, fine, I guess, cool. But the fact that they give the police officers so many different faces to be able to tell their side of the story too, of how, you know, corrupt police officers come to be. It was really cool to see all of that, and it gives so much raw emotion behind, you know, striking those police cars and police officers down. They're just like, you guys need to be put in your place. We're done with your crap. But of course, with every Need for Speed game, there are things that make it, regardless, a Need for Speed game that they definitely followed. There would be no other reason to continue on with the franchise if they wouldn't have been able to get these 4 big points. Gorgeous sceneries, lifelike sounds, aggressive and intense police pursuits, and of course, awesome console generation defining, you know, just simply incredible graphics, which the lifelike sounds was definitely a little bit of a jab at Forza. I love you, but, like, come on now. It's not even good. Come on, guys. You can do better. And of course, last but not least, just some additional points that I've probably touched on before, it's just the vibe and the environment. You're going back into your night racing, the illegal street racing from all sorts of amazing games. And even if it isn't from night, you know, just the general illegal street racing against police officers, it's just the vibing and environment of just this game is just awesome. It's unique, it's new, but yet there's so many similarities to past Need for Speed games from Carbon and from, you know, the Underground series. I could go on and on and on. It's just, they did a really good job with this game, and I'm super happy to be, you know, playing it as early on so I could be able to, you know, see what other updates that they have going on with this game. You know, Need for Speed Heat, like I was saying, is just a fantastic game, and if you haven't bought it already, please go out and, you know, buy it now. I don't know where Ghost Games could go, or the Need for Speed franchise could go from here, because they've hit so many huge marks for me. I'm just absolutely in awe that they made such an awesome game, and I don't even want to know where they're going to try to go from here, because I think they've hit their peak, and if they went out on top, I would be a lot happier than, you know, them just kind of trying to chase this same high that they've got from this game. And they've tried before, and I've been pretty cynical about it and didn't think that they'd be able to do it again. But, you know, Need for Speed Heat is an awesome game. They did it again, but I don't want to know where they go from here. I just want to play more Heat, and that's all I want to do. So thank you for watching this weird ramble video about some of my thoughts about, you know, this love letter that Ghost Games has very finely crafted to the Need for Speed franchise as a whole. I'm in love with it, and I'll be racing in it from for who knows how long. I don't know. It's awesome. So again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. So bye-bye.